Good morning, afternoon, and evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Amber Parks, and I'm a Care Economy Policy Specialist with UN Women. Welcome to the Summit of the Future virtual side event, Caring for the Future, Data and Evidence to Increase Investments in Just, Equitable, and Sustainable Care Economies and Societies. This event is proudly co-convened by UN Women, the ILO, and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, SDC, with the support of our good friends at the Global Alliance for Care. Before we begin, some quick housekeeping. If we can jump to the next slide. Thank you. Interpretation is available today in English, French, and Spanish. You can activate it using the globe icon at the bottom of your screen. The event today will also be recorded, and please feel free to use the Q&A tab to post any questions. We'll do our best to answer them as we go and in the Q&A at the end. And now to the next slide. Thank you. An overview of the format today. We have a really fantastic agenda. Following our opening remarks is our first segment focusing on a UN Women ILO policy tool to estimate the social and economic returns of public investments in care services. Our next segment will be on data to advance women's economic empowerment, zooming in on the Asia and Pacific region. We'll then have a short Q&A session before closing for our closing remarks. And our moderator today is Raquel Coelho, Policy Advisor on Macroeconomics and Care at UN Women. With that, let us start with our opening remarks. We are very delighted to have with us Jemima Nurjuki, Chief of Economic Empowerment at UN Women, followed by Una Gemsch, Policy Advisor and Focal Point for UN Women and the Security Council at SDC. Jemima, over to you to open for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amber. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this important session. Today, we are addressing a critical but often overlooked issue, the undervaluation and unequal distribution of care work. This is not just a gap in our systems, it is a major driver of gender inequality. We know globally women carry out nearly 3 times more unpaid care work than men. And this imbalance is not only unfair to women, but is also a significant barrier to social and economic prosperity. Prioritizing and investing in quality, affordable, and accessible care services and infrastructure would free up women's time, promote fairer care responsibilities, distribution, and generate decent low-carbon jobs. This shift would lead to empowerment of women and break cycles of poverty and uplift entire communities. Recognizing this, UN Women has placed transforming care at the heart of its economic empowerment strategy, with a gender equality accelerator on transforming care systems as one of its 3 main pillars. If you have not seen our strategy, I would encourage you to please have a read, and I hope you will be inspired by the priorities that we are pushing forward to transform care systems. It is also a priority of our Beijing +30 action agenda because we believe it is vital to achieving multiple sustainable goals. Together with our partners, UN Women is committed to driving a comprehensive, society-wide approach to addressing care inequalities. Our Transforming Care initiative aims to benefit 300 million women and girls around the world, freeing up 1 billion hours of unpaid care work and supporting the creation of 40 million low-carbon jobs. Our efforts are driven by our triple mandate. Through our normative mandate, we support member states in implementing key resolutions, including those on the International Day of Care and Support, the Human Rights Council resolution on the centrality of care and support from a human rights perspective, and the ECOSOC's recent resolution on promoting care and support systems for social development. Through our coordination mandate on behalf of the UN Deputy Secretary General, UN Women led the development of the UN system-wide policy guidance on transforming care systems in collaboration with our UN sister agencies ILO, UNDP, Office of the Commissioner on Human Rights, and ECLAC. And again, if you have not seen this policy guidance, please have a look at it from our website. It really provides us with policy entry points for transforming care using the 5R framework. And through our operational mandate, we're building from 14 years of experience working in 34 countries across 6 regions, supporting care-related data collection, policy development, legislative frameworks, cost analysis, and financing strategies, to name a few. I would like to especially recognize our collaboration with the Swiss Agency for Development Cooperation, SDC, and it is so great, Una, to have you with us this morning, and the International Labour Organization, ILO. Together, we implemented a joint program that led to the development of a care costing tool and country studies, which we will present today. This tool has supported over 20 countries to identify gaps in care provision, estimate necessary investments, and assess the benefits across policy areas. And I have to say, it is a tool that has really enabled governments and stakeholders not to just see care as a cost, but an investment that is worth putting resources in. Today, we are honored to have representatives from Morocco and Nepal who will share how these assessments have provided valuable insights for policymakers. I also want to recognize the work of our country and regional offices in grounding these global efforts. Today, the UN Women Asia and Pacific Regional Office will present a report that highlights the critical role of gender data in driving forward this agenda. Finally, I also want to recognize the multiple stakeholders involved in this work, from civil society organizations, employment and domestic workers organizations, philanthropies, and the private sector, many of whom are members of the Global Alliance for Care that we co-convene with the government of Mexico. And it's also really exciting to see the Global Alliance for Care Secretariat here, represented by the head of the Secretariat, Ana Moreno. Special thanks to you, Ana, and the Secretariat for fostering these vital alliances and collaborative efforts. Transforming care systems is not just a choice, it is a necessity and a priority to build a more just, equal, and prosperous world for all. So let us not just speak about the need for change, let us commit to being the architects of that change. Thank you so much, and I really look forward to hearing from our panelists today on how we can continue driving this agenda forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Jemima, and over to you, Una. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm sure there's participants from all over the world joining us here virtually. Thank you so much for inviting us as Switzerland to speak at this event. And thank you very much to Jemima for her insightful introductory remarks. I don't know how much else I can add. As Switzerland, we're obviously very delighted to be here today and to share some of the remarkable outcomes of the joint program between UN Women and ILO, which was financially supported by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation, or short SDC. It's very gratifying to witness how the results and tools from these programs have been effectively scaled up to benefit other countries and how the seeds sown by this program are now blossoming into all sorts of different flowers and generating impact beyond what we had originally envisioned. The impact on institutional level and traction this work has had on especially UN system-wide level are impressive. Jemima has already mentioned a lot of this. She's mentioned that insights and lessons from the joint program, along with other care initiatives, have informed a UN system-wide policy guidance on transforming care systems. And this work has also shaped the care component of the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions, led by the ILO. And additionally, it is encouraging to see how such programs have influenced agencies' strategies, including UN Women's Economic Empowerment Strategy and the Gender Equality Accelerator on transforming the care economy. As highlighted in the final report of the joint program, it has had substantial impact also at country level. I would like to highlight two. In Morocco, the program has contributed to the development of the country's last two national gender reports, which were annexed to the draft budget laws, thereby incorporating care considerations into broader policy planning. In Nepal, the program's success led to the establishment of the National Care Working Group by the National Planning Commission, a notable advancement in addressing care and gender equality issues. We really look forward to hearing more about all countries' experiences with the tools developed through this joint program. And we really hope that these insights will offer valuable lessons for other countries on the most effective ways to implement and scale up such initiatives in diverse contexts. We are really proud that the program successfully demonstrated how policy tools that have been developed at global level can be successfully adapted and applied to different country contexts, and through this, scale their reach immensely. We are pleased that this approach has been effectively carried forward in regional programs by both UN Women and ILO, demonstrating its continued effectiveness. We would obviously be amiss not to mention the rather challenging circumstances at the start of the joint program. The program was designed before the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So the very first thing the UN Women and ILO team had to do was to adapt the program to the drastically different context. And they did this in a true effort of teamwork. And based on the response the program received from the UN system and participating countries, it clearly showed that UN Women and ILO hit the nerve of the time with their comprehensive and integrated approach. Throughout the lifespan of the joint program and beyond, the collaboration between UN Women and ILO has been exemplary. The agencies have truly come together, overcoming many administrative hurdles in the beginning, with a united and common goal to advance gender equality and women's empowerment. It was really wonderful to witness the power of true partnership. In conclusion, we would like to express our appreciation for the ongoing collaboration and dedication of all partners involved. The results achieved through this joint program are a testament to the effectiveness of working together to address complex global challenges and to create positive impact for women and girls worldwide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Una and Jemima, for setting the scene for us. We will now dive into the substance. And here I will hand over to our moderator, Raquel Coelho, to take us through the session today. Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you, Jemima, Una, for this very inspiring introduction. So now we are gonna turn to this first segment of the session, from cost to investments, a tool for estimating the economy and social returns of public investments, in which we want to dive and to deep dive into how we created and how we came up in NOIGF joint efforts with ILO and with colleagues from institutional academia like IPEC on this tool, but particularly what was the purpose of this tool. So we will have in this panel in this panel, Valeria Esquivel, who is our partner in ILO. She's the employment policies and gender specialist. And then we will also have İpek Karakan, who is the professor of economics at Istanbul Technical University. We know that to move to reflect, we know that policymakers have increasingly recognized the importance of care in the policy agendas. They have particularly recognized the importance of investment in care. This has come up very strongly in some of the resolutions that Jemima mentioned, but I also want to highlight this has come up very strongly in the Pact of the Future that was adopted yesterday here in the frameworks of the General Assembly, which is calling for investments to close the social and gender gaps and to particularly invest in care. So we're at a moment of celebration, at a moment where this is clear in the agenda, but we have also acknowledged the challenges that countries face when they want to address how to increase and how to design its fiscal policies to cover these financial gaps. So this is why UN Women and ILO, with the support of SDC in this joint program, came up with this policy tool. It's a policy tool that is designed to support policymakers to make the case for investments in care services, but also generating information to answer 3 practical questions. The first question is, what are the current gaps in our care services? We look at the supply, what is the supply existing, but what is also the demand, and we measure the gaps. Then what is the investment needed that takes to close that gap? We don't like we call it costing, but we know we are costing for investments. So we need to understand, to close the gaps, what are the investments we need to put in place. And then, and most important, to convince some of our financial partners in the governments, it's also to come up with the economic and social returns. So these investments have return, and İpek will go very deeply into that, so I will not extend myself, but it's important also to showcase on how this investment can create also wealth and prosperity to the countries. With the support of the SDC, then, we support the joint program, and we support also the implementation, not of the development of the tool, but also the implementation at country level, applying it in countries like Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Morocco, and Nepal. Some of them are here to present. We are very lucky also to have the government of Morocco and Nepal to present. And they will speak themselves about the findings, but just highlight some of the overall key results of the applications, which is also, by the way, included in a report that compiles the results of the 5 countries' experiences. I want to highlight 3 main takeaways. The first one is that in all the cases, care investments contribute not only to provide quality care, but also job generation of major magnitude. It is really an engine to create jobs and has the potential to create decent jobs, which is most important. In Ethiopia, employment creation potential was estimated over 6 million of jobs. Almost 2/3 were foreseen to be provided by women. Also, another second main takeaway is the substantial job generation, which means substantial earnings generation with a positive implication in tax revenue. Part of this revenue, part of this investment is recovered by tax revenue, and so allowing financing of these potential investments. For example, to give another example of a country which is not here, in Egypt, the analysis showed that the expansion of childcare services costing around 4.5% of the GDP, has the potential to generate revenues corresponding to the 91% of the total cost. So the actual net gap of investment is of 9% of the total cost. So in total, this policy has really helped us to move the conversation, to move the needle politically, because it allows policymakers to both quantify the required investment, but also to see the multiplier effects of these investments into the employment, the social policy outcomes, the expansion of fiscal space. The evidence generated from this tool has been critical in shifting the perceptions of expenditure of care services from a cost to an investment lens, which is of course important when making the case to ministries of finance, as I said, or other economic actors as well. So let's dive in. And in this first part, as I said, we will be presenting the overall framework of the tool. And for that, I want to first introduce our joint program counterpart, Valeria Esquivel from the ILO, which is the Employment Policies and Gender Specialist. And she will expand on the link between public investments in care and the decent job creation. Valeria, over to you.
Yes, I need to, yeah, okay. So let me try to share my screen. Are you seeing it and correctly in presentation mode? I hope.
Yes, we see it.
Okay, excellent. So thank you very much, colleagues. It's so good to see those who have been working on this so hard for so long, and Una, who has supported the joint program. I will share after I end my presentation the link of the program, because it also contains all the reports that we are going to mention. So I'm positioned here between Raquel and Ipek, who will focus on the results. So what I wanted to place is to place the care component of this joint program within what we call an integrated framework. Let's see if I can move this. Yes, as Una mentioned, the joint program was put in place and started with the pandemic, and so we thought that we needed to counter the deleterious effects of the crisis on women, and for that we needed the macro, the employment, and the care angles. So we designed one tool for each of these dimensions, and we've kept working on these dimensions in the post-COVID and current times. So these three tools have served the purpose at the time, but also continue to guide our work. And what we have done with the joint program is creating what we think it's a successful model of intervention that brought UN Women and ILO together, as Una and Raquel emphasized, to work in an integrated way in three interrelated and mutually reinforcing outcomes. The macroeconomic policies, which support employment creation, but also are key for financing investments in care. The costing of investments in the care economy and the identification of positive employment and fiscal revenue impacts of these investments, again, as Raquel mentioned, emphasizing that decent working conditions in care sectors are a prerequisite for good quality care. So we didn't reproduce in our thinking and in our models the current working conditions of care workers, but in the good working conditions that they should have. And one thing I missed to say in my previous slide is that the guide that IPEC worked together with us in putting together is a continuation of the ILO 2018 work that we did in the care report, care work, and care jobs for the future of this work. So I come back to this. So first, the macro, second, the care, third, the sectoral labor market policies that focus on creating decent jobs for women. And it is an integrated approach because it doesn't take investments in care in isolation and reinforces the demand side case for investments in care. And not only the supply side that normally is put forward in the sense in making the case for these services to allow or to remove some of the barriers women face in entering the labor force, but on the demand side, on the idea of creating jobs and decent jobs, in particular for women, which is something that is very important for developing countries, and it was particularly important at the recovery phase of the or after COVID. So there are three consolidated reports of the work we've done. Certainly, IPEC is going to talk about the care one, but let me just highlight a few achievements on this integrated approach, and our colleagues from Nepal, I'm sure they are going to emphasize on them. But for example, in the case of Argentina, the joint program provided the economic case for investments in care services in 2 provinces after we had done the work at the country level, and all these studies budgeted also for the hard infrastructure required in hospital, kindergartens, and schools that then influence gender budgeting at the macro level. And in the case of Nepal, the joint program validated the feasibility of investments in care services for its inclusion in the work in the global accelerator. So again, other results are also available. I will copy the link. I'll stop here to pass the floor to IPEC. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Valeria, for this introduction and framing and reinforcing the importance of these tools, but also the way we make them in a broader context. So now I'll pass the floor to Professor IPEC Ikarakan. She's professor of macroeconomics at Istanbul Technical University, and she's the former president of the International Association of Feminist Economics. IPEC help and work in the development of this tool. And then we would like to hear from you, IPEC. First of all, welcome. And then we would like to hear from you some of the highlights and key features and applications of the policy tool in generating evidence to inform the care economy investments. So over to you, IPEC.
Okay, thank you, Raquel. Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to see that we have over 200 participants with a whole bunch of colleagues and friends that I see amongst them, and also some new people. I think it may be one of the largest gatherings that we presented this tool to, and the findings from this tool. So it's a pleasure for me to be part of this webinar. So Raquel and Valeria have already explained some of the content of the tool, and I think you will help me to move down on the slides. So if we can start moving. Yes, so I will try to provide with some of the things that they didn't say, and I'm sorry if there's some repetition, but given that we have limited time, I'll try to cover the content of the tool and the implementation of the tool in 5 countries to the extent possible. So the tool, basically, as Raquel has already mentioned, provides a methodology to identify the coverage gaps or care deficits, as we call them, in provisioning of social care services or in access to care services, to estimate the costs of eliminating those care deficits, in other words, the cost of required expenditures and investments, and to assess the various economic returns to such investments. So in doing so, and I will explain what comes underneath each step in a moment, but overall, in doing this, in providing such a methodology and promoting the implementation of this methodology with national level data, the tool, in fact, aims to help policymakers and advocates to assess a rationale for increased public spending on care services expansion in view of its particularly economic returns beyond the very well-known and acknowledged social returns that come from access to quality care services. And in doing so, it also basically provides, through particularly identification of coverage gaps and the estimation of costs, it provides a policy roadmap for starting to develop a program for investments in care services. The next slide, please. So what are social care services? What are we talking about? Actually, it's, a comprehensive definition would bring in a lot of sectors. But within the context of this tool, we stayed within the core education services, including early childhood care and preschool education, the ECCE, and primary and secondary education services. And under healthcare, we covered ill patient care, or what we call short-term healthcare services, and long-term care services for the elderly, people with disabilities, or chronic illness. What kind of economic returns? And you will see, if you can please move to the next slide, and you will see in parentheses that we also have economic and social returns. But I should remind you that while the social returns of access to quality care services are multiple and cover a wide range from meeting the care needs of particular population groups that are dependent on care, such as children, elderly, ill, and long-term ill. This tool has a particular focus on economic returns because it tries to set up a conversation, a communication with the people who are in charge of financing such investments. So from a very economic perspective, a standard conventional economic perspective, we divide this chart, this figure that you see, looks at the returns to investment in social care services expansion from supply side and demand side. And on the supply side, one of the things that we talk the most about, particularly as advocates for gender equality in the economy, is that access to social care services decreases the time constraints on women's time as imposed by the conventional gender division of labor, and decreases their time poverty and improves the work-life balance environment. And through that, it improves women's labor supply and helps to decrease the gender gaps in labor force participation. There are other supply side effects, such as how investing, let's stay with the figure, please. Such as how access to early childhood education, for instance, by all children, enhances human capital, helps to decrease socioeconomic inequalities later in life. And through the enhancement of human capital, it also increases productivity and supply-led growth. The focus of this policy tool, however, is on the demand side effects. So it has a more Keynesian perspective, so to speak. And particularly when we say the labor demand side effects, the focus is on how investments in social care has a huge potential for new employment creation, particularly for women's employment, but not only for women's, both for women's and men's, because the care services sector, given its labor-intensive nature, is one of the sectors with the highest, what we call, employment multipliers. So through that substantial jobs generation potential, it helps to decrease unemployment, increase employment, and generate wage incomes. And through that, it also has the potential to decrease poverty, income poverty, and time poverty, and also stimulate growth through the demand side. Next slide, please. In putting the focus on this demand side, what we're doing through an application of this tool is addressing a question of fiscal allocation. Investing in social care infrastructure requires large amounts of public spending and allocation of public resources, as I will share at the end through some findings of the country study. So the policy tool basically proposes an analytical framework for policymakers, particularly on the finance side, on how to explore a short-run demand-side economic rationale for increasing fiscal spending on care services expansion with this focus on the demand side, on new employment creation, but also gender distribution of this new employment creation and the impact on the gender employment gap, and through some extended versions, also looking at returns through earnings, labor earnings generation, and the impact on poverty. And a lot of the studies, and what this is something that we recommend in the policy tool as well, compares the economic returns estimation with in a comparative framework against other lines of spending. And the question that we ask is, if the same amount of money from the public finances, public resources is to be spent on care services expansion versus, for instance, physical infrastructure improvement, the construction sector, or green energy, or cash transfers, what would be the comparative outcomes? So through that comparative framework, we basically try to rationalize resource allocation and public spending decisions on the basis of the kind of outcomes that we expect from these different lines of spending. And what the research shows is that where you decide to spend your money on has very serious, substantial distributional outcomes, particularly in terms of gender distribution. Next slide, please. So the pilot implementation, as Raquel and Valeria have mentioned, have been done in these 5 countries that you see on the top from the different regions. And the tool, in fact, built up on prior studies from a number of countries, again, that you see on this list. And the most extensive one was the one for the ILO report on care work and care jobs, which was published in 2018, the report that Valeria has already mentioned. Next slide, please. We assess the care coverage gaps, looking at, so these requires a number of decisions, which sectors to target, what are the appropriate policy targets, how many more potential care receivers and providers are needed to achieve these targets, which basically gives us our care coverage gap. And the question of, beyond the coverage gaps, whether there are any necessary adjustments for service quality improvements beyond the number of people to be covered or the number of service providers. The second step of the tool, the second part of the tool, looks at assessment of the cost. So basically, we cost the required magnitude of additional expenditures that is necessary to eliminate the care coverage gap that was estimated in the first step. And in doing this, we again do the necessary cost adjustments, not only for quantity, coverage gaps, coverage targets, but also for employment and service quality. And we also, in the second step, the tool provides a methodology in terms of how the researchers can place and contextualize the cost that emerges from this exercise in the country's current fiscal spending patterns. The third step is the estimation of economic returns with a focus on employment generation. And here we looked at not only direct employment generation, the number of jobs that we expect to be created in the care services sectors, but also indirect jobs in other sectors through backward linkages from which the care services sectors procures inputs. And we also estimate at this macro level the rough gender distribution of this new employment creation. Next slide, please. there are two other steps to look at economic returns. One of them is the distributional outcomes. This is a more time and resource intensive and skill intensive part. So through a micro simulation modeling, it is also possible to look at the distribution of new jobs, not only by gender, but also by household income, education, age, previous labor market status, and also estimate the distribution of this income, its impact on poverty reduction, and also its impact on gender gaps in earnings and also in time use between paid and unpaid work. The final returns has to do with estimation of macroeconomic impact through macro modeling. And one of the things that we do here is fiscal tax revenues generation and looking at the self-financing potential of the initial outlay of expenditures. And also it is possible to estimate impact on a range of other macro variables. And if you use a comparative framework, then it becomes possible to compare all these outcomes, returns to initial spending on social care expansion to spending on other lines, other sectors or other lines of spending. So the consolidated report, if we can move on to the next slide, covered 5 countries. And here you see a rough profile. The Argentina study, Argentina already had a national level study, so they implemented this time under this joint program at the province level. The other 4 countries implemented the study at the national level. And as you can see, all of them have covered early childhood education and preschool education. Some covered other sectors, as you can see, depending on national priorities. And in terms of economic returns, all the studies have looked at job creation outcomes, but they also picked and chose other economic variables to look at. Next slide, please.
Ipek, I'm gonna ask you to kind of wrap up, so we have time also to get to the country studies as well.
Yes. Okay.
I think some of the things are gonna be there also.
Yes. Okay. So I think I'm gonna leave the most of the results to the presenters from the countries, but let me say that depending on the country's starting circumstances and economic and social indicators, the care coverage gaps range from, for instance, for the early childhood care services from around 3% of population for Morocco to as high as 9% of population in Ethiopia. The magnitude of required public expenditures also range from less than 1% of GDP for the case of Nepal to 4.5% for Egypt. And the new employment creation, Raquel already covered some of them, was as high as 6 million jobs for Ethiopia, corresponding to almost 15% of current employment, ranging to around 250,000 new jobs, corresponding to 2.4% of current employment in Nepal. And so if we can please move to the very last slide. Social care services expansion can be explored as an effective policy strategy for inclusive and sustainable economies through its potential to meet these multiple policy objectives that emerge also from the demand side. And in that sense, the tool actually addresses something that was already amongst the 12 commitments of the UN Secretary General's report called Our Common Agenda, where investing in care came up under 2 of the 12 commitments, one on women's economic inclusion through investments in the care economy, and the other one about promoting decent jobs generating growth through investments in sectors with the highest employment multipliers, with the greatest potential for creating more and better jobs, such as the green, care, and digital economies. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really sorry to interrupt you, Ipek. We could be hearing you for many, many times, but I think it's important now also to go to the country experiences of applying this tool. And we will do so in a dialogue, in a conversation with Ram Pujal and Loknan Dushan from Nepal, sorry. and with Sineb Bouba from Morocco. And we're gonna try to organize this part like in a dialogue. So I will pose you two questions, and I want to start by the first question, which is why you consider investing in the care economy is important in the context of your countries, in the context of Nepal, in the context of Morocco. So please, Mr. Pujal, you have the word first.
Thank you, Raquel, distinguished expert, colleagues, and all the participants. Greeting from Nepal. I'm honored to be here, and I'm very much thankful to the organizer for inviting me in this STEAM event today. With regard to the question, I'm sharing some insights from Nepal's experience with the joint program. Firstly, care sector development provides an extraordinary opportunity for Nepal by promoting formal care services. This is not just about providing jobs, it is about fostering sustainable employment that fuels our economic engine. It also addresses the care gap from the high youth out migration and diminishing fertility trend. The care sector, which is largely feminized, can be the major generator of decent job and productive employment as envisioned in our 16th National Development Plan and also the sectoral working plans of the focal ministries. And currently, we have also initiated the Global Accelerator for Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transition in which it is reflected. Secondly, unlocking the potential of care workforce through improved integrated care services is essential in fast-changing Nepali society and family structure. You know, about 40% of inactive women indicated unpaid care and domestic work as the barrier from entering the labor force in Nepal. Thus, by investing in early childhood care, we not only support children's development, but also contribute care workers' skill. This addresses the gender occupational segregation in key care sectors and also enhances economic prosperity. Lastly, we recognize the role of care sectors in strengthening gender-responsive social protection. Care-related services have the potential to generate more formal employment and foster entrepreneurships to address the growing care demands in Nepal. When we invest in care sector, we are not just developing immediate jobs, but also promoting human development, transforming them into the human capital for long-term and sustainable economic growth, for meeting our demand of socio-economic transformations agenda of country. In conclusion, investing in care in Nepal makes all the other possibles in the context of global economic and environmental crisis. It is all about creating jobs, empowering women, and ensuring a prosperous future for all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pujal, for your insights on this. And we will now move to the experience of Morocco. And please, Ms. Bouba, if you could also share your thoughts on the application in your country.
Bonjour, j'espère que vous m'entendez. Alors, c'est un vrai plaisir d'être parmi vous et c'est un honneur pour moi de vous présenter ce que nous avons travaillé sur la question de l'économie de soins à autrui. Et je tiens tout d'abord à vous expliquer le contexte de la chose, comment nous avons, je dirais, opté à travailler sur ce projet. Déjà, la première des choses, je tiens à remercier les équipes d'ONU Femmes qui ont été toujours là pour nous appuyer, pour nous aider, pour réfléchir collectivement, pour pouvoir, je dirais, défricher le terrain, explorer les voies et les leviers d'action pour pouvoir promouvoir les femmes. Je tiens à préciser que Madame Leila Arhiwi a fait un énorme travail, un excellent travail avec nous. Madame Noussairi continue sur cette voie qui est une personne formidable. Et je remercie aussi Madame Roufrani Lamia qui est une ouvrière qui s'implique sur ces questions des soins autrui. C'est un privilège pour moi de travailler ensemble sur cette question. Donc, le pourquoi de la chose. Le point de départ, c'était malheureusement la crise de Covid. Et après, il y a eu beaucoup de crises successives, géopolitiques, climatiques, etc. Et on sait très bien que les grandes perdantes par rapport aux crises, c'est les femmes. Et ce sont les femmes, ce sont les inégalités de genre qui sont en train de s'accentuer à cause de ces crises. Donc, et pour le cas du Maroc, il y a encore une autre caractéristique qui fait que nous avons plaidé pour travailler sur ces questions. C'est qu'au Maroc, le taux d'activité des femmes est faible et ne cesse de baisser. Il ne dépasse pas 20%. Donc, c'était vraiment un environnement qui nous a poussé à travailler ensemble avec ONU Femmes sur les niches porteuses, je dirais, d'opportunités pour les femmes pour pouvoir dépasser, je dirais, cette situation qui est le manque d'accès des femmes aux opportunités économiques et surtout au marché du travail. Et comme vous le savez très bien, à l'échelle internationale, c'est confirmé comme quoi l'économie du soin à autrui est un secteur porteur d'opportunités pour les femmes. Donc, c'est ce qui nous a d'ailleurs, je dirais, motivés pour travailler sur ce grand programme. Donc, il y a déjà toutes les données parce que il y a aussi la question de data qui est très importante et j'insiste sur cela. C'est que toutes les études du Haut Commissariat au plan pour le cas du Maroc, les enquêtes surtout, et aussi les études qui ont été faites aussi par notre direction, la direction des études et prévisions financières, elles attestent sur quoi? Ils attestent comme quoi sur un constat qui est très important, c'est que la décision d'accès au marché du travail, elle est intimement liée à gérer au nombre d'enfants ou bien aux enfants pris en charge par, par les femmes. Et encore une étude assez récente qui vient d'être publiée par le HCP en 2024. Et qu'est-ce qu'il nous montre, cette étude? Elle nous montre comme quoi que la décision des femmes de participer à la population active, elle est vraiment demeure fortement tributaire de leur capacité de concilier entre vie professionnelle et vie familiale. Et aussi, un autre constat, il émane cette fois des enquêtes du HCP. Qu'est-ce qu'ils nous disent? Ils nous disent comme quoi les ménages sans enfants affichent des taux d'activité des femmes les plus élevés, alors que ceux qui sont composés de 2 enfants au moins de 15 ans enregistrent les taux les plus bas. Cela veut dire quoi? Cela nous a vraiment motivés à travailler sur cette, je dirais, dimension de l'économie de soins à autrui qui porte sur le préscolaire et la petite enfance et surtout le préscolaire, surtout le préscolaire. Le pourquoi du préscolaire, déjà, comme je l'ai signalé, c'est que nous avons cet handicap qui empêche les femmes de travailler, déjà de travailler et aussi de se maintenir dans le marché du travail. Et en plus, le préscolaire, il a cette capacité de pouvoir travailler sur la valorisation du capital humain et aussi sur cette question, je dirais, de renforcement de la productivité, je dirais, des travailleurs et des travailleuses qui ont des responsabilités familiales. Voilà ce qui nous a motivés à travailler sur l'économie des soins à l'autrui et surtout sur cette question du préscolaire et de la petite enfance. Et je ne peux pas ne pas, je dirais, évoquer les résultats du dernier travail qu'a fait la Banque mondiale sur les questions, je dirais, sur les femmes, l'entreprise et le droit, qui a révélé que l'amélioration de l'accès aux services de garde d'enfants contribuerait à l'augmentation de la participation des femmes à la population active de près d'1 point de pourcentage à court terme et de 2 points de pourcentage de taux d'activité sur 5 ans. Donc, je ne pourrais pas ne pas évoquer ce quadruple, je dirais, dividende de l'investissement dans les soins à autrui, surtout sur l'investissement dans le préscolaire et dans la petite enfance qui ne peut que générer ce quadruple dividende en apportant l'appui pour renforcer la participation des femmes à la force de travail, en contribuant à l'épanouissement des capacités des enfants, ce qui est aussi très important, en créant des emplois décents, comme elle a été dit par notre collègue du Népal. Ce n'est pas question que de création d'emplois, mais c'est la durabilité de l'emploi et de la décence de l'emploi. Et aussi la question de l'amélioration de la productivité, comme vous le savez très bien, c'est une ambition que nous voulons atteindre dans toutes les économies, c'est que l'amélioration de cette productivité, et cette productivité ne peut être améliorée si on n'arrive pas à concilier entre les obligations familiales et les obligations, je dirais, professionnelles des travailleurs et des travailleuses. Voilà toute je dirais, l'utilité de travailler sur l'économie du soin autrui et surtout sur le segment, je dirais, petite enfance préscolaire, parce que comme l'a très bien expliqué Madame Ipek, il s'agit de plusieurs composantes de l'économie du soin autrui, mais notre premier travail a beaucoup plus concerné cette dimension parce que nous jugeons au Maroc, en partenariat avec ONU Femmes, que c'est une composante très importante et que ces dividendes sont énormes. Voilà pour le cas du Maroc par rapport à cette question du pourquoi l'investissement dans l'économie du soin autrui et surtout sur dans le segment préscolaire et la petite enfance.
Merci bien, Madame Zinevouva. Et en fait, nous sommes très contents d'ouvrir, d'entendre que l'outil était très bien reçu, mais aussi très useful et pour vous, et pour Népal, d'avoir des résultats concrets. And I think this also, you already mentioned some of the key points that I was going to ask you in a second round of questions, which is actually based on your experience of applying the tool, what were some of the key findings, the key results, on the application. And I would say maybe you can add some information. Why do you suggest, would you invite other countries to apply this tool? What would you have to say for that?
Par rapport à l'outil. Par rapport à l'outil.
Oui, and I think we can start again this round with Mr. Bujal, and then we'll go to you as well, Ms. Buba.
Thank you, Raquel, once again. It's a quite very comprehensive questions to answer, but still I will do my best to give you some insights based on our experience, how we undertook that research and got some very insightful result. According to the labor force survey third, where labor force participations of Nepal stand about 26% of women as compared with the 54% of the man, and the unemployment rate of women is 4 times more than that of man, is indicated by the third labor force survey of Nepal, and this is the fact and outcomes of the research which Nepal country undertook quite a few years back. And we are approaching these existing gender disparities from care lens to turn gender barriers into opportunities for fostering a greater economic prosperity, using the care economy model as one of the deserving and the comprehensive model to be adopted in Nepal. So what we undertook 3 very comprehensive studies in the last few years and come up with some very remarkable findings. The COVID-19 pandemic has offered us a lens to see the immense potential of targeted interventions, particularly when it comes to the social protection measures. The fiscal analysis of this study that we undertook through our joint programs indicated that while the government reliefs effort provided essential support, especially in a time of the unprecedented global challenges, there is a room for further enhancing gender responsive measures in social protection, especially for women in the informal sectors. A tailored program that account for the unique needs can mitigate the impact of future crises and ensure gender inclusive coverage. Similarly, the study of sectoral gender employment highlights the potentials for job creations for women in agriculture, infrastructure, service sectors, tourism, and even public and other priority sectors. It has emphasized the need for labor regulations to ensure decent and rewarding jobs and the need of gender responsive sectoral and industrial policies to address gender occupational segregation in Nepal. I want to highlight that as women farmers are working in the vulnerable conditions due to the climate change, or targeted support through agriculture stimulus packages and enhancing across the financial resources can significantly boost the national economic growth that we achieved through our studies, which we undertook earlier. Moreover, extending continued support to women-led and operated care services and hospitality will create a new opportunities for employment and robust economic expansion. With regard to the care assessment that you raised right now, which introduced an innovative methodology to help align national vision with the real and tangible outcome, we learned that by investing to meet Nepal's care coverage gaps in education and health as for SDG targets, out of total of 1.3 million direct and indirect estimated jobs, 60% of which will be fulfilled by the women. This strengthens the aggregate demands across the entire economy, while simultaneously improving long-term social well-being, gender equality, and economic prosperity in the nation. This process has demonstrated that the care work is not just a social responsibility, but also a very powerful accelerator of the national goals as well as the SDG 2030. More importantly, the multiplier of the care work extends beyond immediate employment, contributing to social protection and long-term economic growth in Nepal. To conclude, I want to highlight that the government of Nepal is very much committed to advance the care sector by generating the required evidences, data, and informations, which is also envisioned through the 16th National Development Plan, immediately approved, recently approved National Integrated Social Protection Frameworks, and also the Integrated National Employment Framework that we already developed and it is now in implementation. The data that which we are collecting and producing very soon, for example, NLSS4 mix also will give us a clear picture about what will be happening in futures and how we can make linked with our existing programs. Formation of care working group, which is leading the process of developing the care roadmap and care policy as for 5R framework 6 to promote decent care work for women with the overall objective of increasing female labor force participation from existing 26% to 35% in next 5 years. These initiatives are not just policy choices. They represent a transformative strategy for job creation, women empowerment, economic resilience, and also for ensuring the human rights is guaranteed by the Constitution's 2050 and also guaranteed by the ILO charters. I hope we can all work together to implement gender-sensitive policies that align with our national, regional, and global vision, ensuring that all members of our society can thrive. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pujal. We're so happy to see as well how the specific implementation of the tool has led to concrete results. And, this roadmap it's really a great example of that. So congratulations for that and for the Nepal efforts. We want to also hear now again from you, from Ms. Boba, on the case of Morocco. Based on your experience, what do you think the application of the tool brought? What are the key findings? Why should others engage in this process as well?
Merci à vous. Alors, déjà, comme je l'ai signalé, nous avons déjà contextualisé les atouts de cet outil. Pour nous, cet outil était innovant pour pouvoir concilier la problématique à laquelle nous faisons face au Maroc. C'est la question de la faiblesse de l'activité des femmes. Et c'est une faiblesse qui risque de s'accentuer au regard du contexte de crise, comme l'a été expliqué, parce que tous les résultats qui ont émané de cet outil et sur les effets de la crise, sur l'égalité de genre et sur la question des soins à autrui, ils ont été publiés dans le rapport sur le budget genre qui accompagne annuellement la présentation du projet de loi de finances. Donc, nous, le contexte et l'utilité de l'outil, il était assez clair par rapport à ce dont nous avons besoin en termes je dirais, de recherche, de levier d'action ou bien je dirais, d'opportunités pour que les femmes accèdent davantage à l'emploi. Donc, une fois l'outil il a été assez, je dirais, compris, nous avons opté, comme je l'ai dit, pour la dimension préscolaire et petite enfance. Et je tiens à préciser que nous avons travaillé sur la généralisation du préscolaire. Pourquoi? Parce que déjà le Maroc dispose d'un programme national de généralisation de développement du préscolaire qui a été dont l'objectif est la généralisation du préscolaire pour les enfants âgés de 4 à 5 ans à l'horizon 2028. Et c'est un programme, je dirais, qui a été mis en place en réponse aux orientations royales. Et je tiens à préciser certains chiffres. Comme je l'ai toujours dit, les chiffres sont très, très importants parce que ce sont les constats factuels qui nous ont confortés de telle manière à continuer de travailler sur cette question et à vouloir expérimenter cet outil, comme l'a été expliqué par Madame Ipek, qui est fort utile. Donc, je tiens juste à préciser comme quoi, depuis le lancement de ce programme jusqu'à l'année scolaire 2023-2024, le taux de préscolarisation des filles, déjà, il est passé de 45,3% à 78, plutôt de 41,6 à 80%. Donc, nous avons pu gagner 38 points de pourcentage juste en termes d'accès déjà des filles au préscolaire. Déjà, nous sommes en train de préparer une bonne relève par rapport à la question d'accès, d'éducation, d'accès à l'éducation et de valorisation du capital humain. Et aussi, un constat qui est très important, c'est que les emplois créés dans le préscolaire sont à dominance féminine. Nous avons un taux d'emploi des femmes dans le préscolaire qui approche de 90%. Donc, tous les ingrédients sont là pour dire comme quoi l'application de cet outil sur la dimension préscolaire, elle est très importante. C'est ce que nous avons fait. Nous avons appliqué l'outil en s'alignant sur les cibles du programme national pour la généralisation du préscolaire avec tous les modèles et la simulation que Madame Ipek a eu le plaisir de nous expliquer. C'est un outil extraordinaire. Je ne cesserai de remercier et Madame Ipek et les équipes d'ONU Femmes de pouvoir nous imprégner dans ces outils qui sont très importants pour l'action publique. Donc, les résultats qui ont émané de l'application de cet outil, ils sont très importants. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y a déjà juste le fait de pouvoir généraliser ou bien d'atteindre les cibles d'un programme qui existe déjà, ça devrait normalement nous permettre de créer jusqu'à presque 50 000 emplois. Ça veut dire, avec un programme qui existe déjà, ça pourrait nous permettre de réaliser 50 000 créations de 50 000 emplois pour les femmes. Et la caractéristique, c'est que ces emplois sont décents. Comme je l'ai expliqué, je tiens à expliquer, parce que pour le cas du Maroc et pour plusieurs pays, nous ne sommes pas les seuls, c'est que beaucoup, la part de l'emploi, je dirais, non rémunéré, elle reste quand même importante pour nous, le Maroc. C'est beaucoup plus l'emploi des aides familiales qui est beaucoup plus dominant dans le milieu rural qui domine. Donc, pouvoir créer de l'emploi et de l'emploi aussi décent, c'est vraiment une aubaine, c'est une solution, ce qui fait que ça veut dire que déjà, pouvoir atteindre les cibles du programme national pour la généralisation du préscolaire nous permettrait d'apporter des solutions et des solutions pertinentes à cette question de, je dirais, de création d'emplois des femmes. Donc, ce qui nous amène à dire comme quoi le préscolaire, elle constitue un levier d'action qui devrait être davantage, je dirais, pris en charge et je dirais, comme quoi en essayant de vraiment d'y travailler efficacement parce que cela permettrait d'avoir, comme je l'ai déjà dit, explorer les 4 dividendes qui sont le maintien dans le marché de l'emploi, de la création de l'emploi, la valorisation du capital humain et aussi le renforcement de la productivité. Voilà, et je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bua, and also thrilled to hear what policy measures concretely this policy to open to you, and particularly enhancing early childhood education and the creation of employment that will mainly benefit women in this regard as well. So congratulations as well, and we look forward to see and to hear from you in other spaces on how this advances. But now we're gonna turn to a second moment in this event, which is also because many of you reflected in your studies and in your country cases the importance of having good quality data. And also IPEC presented on this when she presented the tool. So we have with us a whole region, the Asia Pacific region, which just launched a specific report on how to advance with data and evidence this agenda on women's economic empowerment and on enhancing care. So for that, we're going to turn to a third session, and I want to give the floor to first Christine Arab, who is the Regional Director of UN Women Asia Pacific. And then we will present Cecilia Tinoni, which is also our statistics specialist at that office, will also present the main findings of the report. I also want to let you know that we are taking notes of the questions, and at the end of the session, as far as the time allows, we will try to address some of these questions with all the panelists. So please keep on putting your questions here, and I ask, if possible as well, to all other present panelists to stay with us to address some of those. So Christine, of course, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Raquel, and thank you, everyone. Can you hear me? Is it fine? Yes, great. It's been a real pleasure also because prior to becoming the regional director, I was the representative in Egypt, and the use of the tools was extremely helpful in helping the ministers we worked with in probing their own fiscal space and some very difficult internal budget discussions. So it's very good to also hear what everyone is doing. I'm really pleased. Good evening to some of you. For us, it's the evening. Good morning and good afternoon. I'm pleased to share with you the latest report that we've produced. It's Caring Societies, Inclusive and Green Economies in Asia and the Pacific, unveiling data to advance women's economic empowerment beyond GDP. It's been published at a time when the Asia-Pacific region is grappling with widening inequalities, a significant impact of climate change. We are the most disaster-prone region in the world, and a persistent digital gender divide. But we're also dealing with significant demographic changes in Asia and the Pacific, which is directly impacting the care economy. And this publication was deliberately done so as to be relevant to the Beyond GDP initiative that we are increasingly hearing about within the UN. Today, GDP alone fails to capture the often unpaid care work performed by women and girls, the well-being, equity, environmental sustainability, and to ensure a truly inclusive economy and prosperous societies. In this report, we try to show the metrics that can be used to assess progress It underscores the urgent need to move beyond traditional economic indicators and to ground our understanding of progress in evidence that looks at human welfare, the health of the planet, and inclusive economic participation. As our discussants today have outlined, the report emphasizes the centrality of care economy and as how invisible it is and an undervalued sector. But this is not just a matter of fairness. It's also, as the report shows, an economic imperative. The report underlines the enormous untapped potential of the care economy, arguing that if recognized and invested in, it could be a game changer of growth and sustainability for countries. Investing in the care economy is also a necessity in view of the changing demographics that I mentioned to you. These investments have the potential to yield benefits to women's economic empowerment as a key enabler for resilient and thriving lives. But the report tries to highlight investing in care systems, how it can generate jobs, boost productivity, and create the social infrastructure necessary for economies to thrive. Another critical aspect of the report is its recognition of the intersection of gender and climate action. And as I said earlier, the Asia-Pacific region is the most disaster-prone region in the world. So we have made a very studied effort to fold in the degree to which climate resilience and sustainability is impacted by investments in the care economy. Empowering women through climate-smart agriculture, renewable energy initiatives, and community-based conservation efforts can create more resilient economies, and gender-responsive climate action is necessary for achieving sustainable development, empowering women. Perhaps the most powerful message of this report is the call to move beyond GDP and rethink our economic models. It underscores that GDP growth neglects the well-being of people and the planet, or exacerbates inequality, is not sustainable and is not real progress. By embracing beyond the GDP framework and the data it provides, we can get better measures of societal progress by including gender indicators, environmental health metrics, and the value of unpaid care work. It is in this regard that the report is contributing to a bold new initiative that we've launched through the support and partnership of the Government of Australia Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the UN Women Gender Action Lab. It's an innovation lab that is set up for our private sector partners across the region. The Gender Action Lab seeks to mobilize deeper action and leverage and expand the innovation capabilities of the private sector, as they are going to be the ones to change the game, as we say, for women's overall economic empowerment and for the care economy overall. Starting with implementation in 4 ASEAN countries, the Gender Action Lab is envisioned to grow to a long-term multi-stakeholder, multi-donor platform across all of Asia and the Pacific. I'd like to recognize the hard and good work put into this report by our partners and by the UN Women Care experts and led by Katja Freewald. And as my colleague Cecilia Tinian will outline now, the report is more than just data. It's really a call to action, and we've tried to provide the evidence to do that. So thank you very much, and I hand over back to you, Raquel, for Cecilia's intervention.
Yes, thank you, Christine. And yeah, I think the report couldn't come at a greater moment. In the Pact of the Future just adopted today, there is a specific call to precisely come up with new measures that complement GDP from the perspective you just put here, which is not really being reflected in this measure. So we are certain that the outcomes of the report will feed into that conversation, and it comes at the perfect moment. So now let's hear about the report. Let's hear about it with our colleague Cecilia Tinoni, who led this effort at the Asia Pacific Regional Office. So Cecilia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Raquel and Christine. I'm just gonna share my screen. Give me just 1 second, please. Can you see me and hear me and see the slide?
We see you. The slides are not on full screen.
Give me 1 second, please. Now?
Now they are okay. Go
Okay,
ahead.
super. Thank you so much. I'm also turning off my video because it's raining season in Thailand. Indeed, have a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from Bangkok, Thailand. Today, I'm delighted to present for the very first time our very recently released report, Caring Societies, Inclusive and Green Economies in Asia and the Pacific. Our report is driven by a simple yet disturbing fact, which is that our economic model, the current economic model, has actually failed women and girls in the region. When we look at the Asian Pacific region economic growth, we see that the region has experienced sustained economic growth since 2000, surpassing the global average. Countries in the region have also witnessed significant improvement in access to health and education, yet there are still gender gaps at play in the Human Development Index. And indeed, economic growth and improved social conditions did not translate into the empowerment of all women and girls. One of the reasons is that labor markets are still severely gendered. Over the last 30 years, gender gap in the labor force participation rate declined merely by 2%. When we look at country-level data, we see that no country in Asia and the Pacific has achieved gender equality in the labor force. On the contrary, there is a systematic bias, as you can see clearly from the graph, with women at a disadvantage. When we look at status in employment, for those women that actually manage to participate in the labor market, we see that more women compared to men are in vulnerable employment, are either contributing family workers or own account workers. Less women compared to men are business owners, and less women than men have an opportunity for leadership. In the last decades, there has been slow progress in the region in terms of legal frameworks that promote, enforce, and monitor gender equality in employment. Out of 16 countries with data available, we see that 9 countries are still far or very far from achieving the target. This is happening despite the fact that gender equality and women's empowerment is an intrinsic goal in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, but is also a key accelerator for achieving all SDGs. And this is because women and girls play a vital and diverse role across all the 3 pillars of the Sustainable Development Agenda: economic pillar, social pillar, and environmental pillar. So the Summit of the Future and the Beyond GDP initiative actually allow us to leverage a key framework to advance evidence-informed decision-making for women's and girls' economic rights and empowerment. So our report has 3 key objectives. First of all, to identify a set of relevant indicators from a women economic empowerment perspective, and this data mapping has been guided by the UN Women Economic Empowerment Strategy that Jemima has mentioned in her opening remarks. Based on this mapping, to advance a proposal on Beyond GDP from a WE lens, but most importantly, to also empower countries and national stakeholders with some evidence and data to enhance informed decision-making in areas that have a transformative potential to foster overall progress, not only toward SDG 5, but toward all SDGs. In the report, there are 3, these transformative areas are 3 key UN Women Gender Equality accelerators, namely transforming care systems, women and the world of work, and gender-responsive climate action. And the ultimate aim of the report is really to build consensus around a women's economic empowerment transformative agenda that leverages the production and use of gender data, more specifically official statistics, as pathways to action now as well as for the future. Very briefly on the methodology, as I was mentioning, the scope of the report is official statistics. We have leveraged international data sources that are publicly available, such as the SDG Global Database, UN Women Data Hub, UN Data Gender Data Hub, World Bank, ILOstat. And to this wealth of gender indicators, we apply 2 selection criteria. One, the extent to which the objective of the indicator was speaking either explicitly or implicitly to realizing the economic rights and autonomy of women and girls. And secondly, whether the indicator was using a gender lens to dismantle structural inequalities in economic systems. This led us to identify an indicator framework of 206 indicators that include the 54 gender-specific SDGs indicator as identified by UN Women in 2018, as well as indicators under the minimum set of gender indicators aligned with the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. To this indicator framework, we apply a geographical lens for the Asian Pacific region for 49 countries, and we refine the list as per data availability for those countries, as well as availability of sex-aggregated data. And this list resulted in 77 indicators that are relevant from a women economic empowerment perspective. Data was retrieved as of July 2024, so the report includes the latest gender data available, and all estimates refer to the latest available year. One major limitation that we faced was that different data sources adopted different sub-regional groupings, and this obviously led to challenges in data comparability and sub-regional analysis. To analyze this wealth of gender data available in the GA, in the Gender Equality Accelerator on care, we adopted the Transforming Care System approach. This approach considers not only the supply and the demand of care services in the care economy, but also includes the policy and the normative space, as well as labor rights that affect women's life cycle. It does also include a strong focus on social norms, especially discriminatory social norms that translate assigned reproductive roles into gender labor market. This approach calls for enhancing evidence-informed decision-making, and indeed, valuing and recognizing care work in official statistics can trigger, as we just heard, decisive policy action. However, the extent to which policies and programs are gender transformative really depends on their capacity to address the critical element of economic empowerment simultaneously. So Transforming Care Systems calls to tackle the power and decision-making that women have, for instance, about their reproductive lives, ensuring equal rights and granting women control over resources, but also altering the social, economic, and institutional context in which women operate. So the indicator framework for Asian Pacific for the Gender Equality Accelerator on Transforming Care System does adapt and adopt also this framework and classifies indicators accordingly for the 3 domains of change: power, resources, and systems that policies are asked to address simultaneously. But it also includes an indicator on the inequality of opportunities and inequality of outcomes, indicating also the potential progress of or lack therein when the domains of change are not actually addressed. Just to showcase some of the results, the report is actually very rich in terms of gender indicators. I'm just going to provide here a quick snapshot. When we look at the power and agency and autonomy in decision-making over reproductive rights of women and girls in the region, we know there has been an improvement in, for instance, the legal minimum age of marriage. However, child marriage is still a practice across countries, as you can see from the graph. And this is due both because of economic reasoning and economic motivation, but also about social expectation around family formation that really reinforce restrictive roles for women and really negatively affect their economic opportunities. Time is the most precious resources that we all have. We all have 24 hours in a day. It's very democratic resources and is central in any approach to transforming care systems. As you see in the graphs, the proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic and care work by sex and type in the latest year, women spent more time on the unpaid provision of care services, both direct and indirect, compared to men. And when this is added to other productive activities, such as, for instance, employment, we see that women are really the one affected by other deprivations, such as, for instance, time poverty. Systems in Asia Pacific are gender blind. Out of 34 countries with available data, we see that in 15 countries, laws do not prohibit the dismissal of pregnant workers. Out of these 34 countries, in 26 countries, the period of absence due to childcare are not accounted in pension benefit. Most importantly, we see that there is a gap, a gender gap between the length of maternity leave and the length of paternity leave. So we're really calling policy measures to be both care enabling and gender equalizing as foundational for comprehensive care systems. When these three domains of change are not addressed simultaneously, we clearly see that women are affected by inequality of opportunities in the labor market. We have aggregated and estimated at the regional level that 65%, for instance, of women is the highest labor force participation among among women between 25 and 54 years old. And these women do not have any child care responsibilities, especially for children in preschool age, so 6 years old. Whereas the lowest, 49%, is for women who are actually married and have children below 6 years of age. This is happening despite the fact that women's true labor force surveys tell us they are actually willing to work more hours, they're looking for jobs, they're available to work, but the opportunities in the market are severely limited for them. Inequality of opportunities prevent women from realizing their full potential in the economy and beyond. When we look at the inequality of outcomes in the economy, we see that women, more women than men, work in care employment. And this is surely reflecting also gender social norms regarding reproductive roles assigned to women. We also see that there is occupational segregation with more women being, for instance, nurses or domestic workers, and more men being, for instance, doctors. There is also, in most countries with available data for our region, a gender pay gap in the economy with women at a disadvantage. Overall, there is a lack of decent care work in the region, with 63% of women being in informal employment. So transforming care system really calls for investment. When we look at the number of countries with system in place to track and make public allocation for gender equality and women's empowerment, only 9 countries out of 26 with available data satisfied and this criteria, meaning they have system in place. This is a necessity to be changed, because when we look at the population structure in the region, we see, for instance, that there are less women than men, and there are more women in old age group. The demand on women for unpaid care services is deemed actually to increase in the next decades. And when we listen to women through gender data, we hear from them that actually they're worried. They're worried that they don't have enough money for old age, especially in South Asia, with 64% of women being very worried about, for instance, not having a pension and not having enough monetary resources for old age, compared to 55% of men in South Asia. Indeed, when we look at the projection for the dependency ratio, we see that there are demographic shifts at play. However, we see that the two different subregions are facing different demographic shift. In East Asia and the Pacific, population projection apologies, may imply rising health care due to old age care needs and pension costs. Whereas in South Asia, challenges may lie in creating enough jobs to support a growing workforce. So how GDP can help us really informing actions toward transforming care system with this comprehensive lens? Well, first of all, GDP has many limitations from a gender lens. The informal and digital economy are theoretically included in GDP. However, in less mature national statistical system, these are not reflected due to data gaps or lack of quality, and this underestimates the contribution of women, affecting gender transformative policymaking in employment, social protection, and economic planning. GDP does not also subtract the cost associated with environmental degradation, pollution, or depletion of natural resources, which can lead to an overestimation of economic welfare. These two components and limitations are actually related to measurement to practical measurement challenges that are actually being discussed and tackled within the United Nations statistical system through the revision of the system of national account, for instance, or the system of environmental accounting. What is really worrisome from a feminist perspective is that GDP does not assess how well an economy empowers women, nor distributional justice. We know already that GDP does exclude unpaid domestic and care work due to challenges in identifying market wages. And we know that GDP overlooks important issues, such as the extent to which systems are gender blind. However, this system play a critical role in shaping the economic environment in which production and investment occur. So the Beyond GDP initiative and agenda calls for identifying a very small set of indicators between 10 and 20 that are concise, well-established, widely accepted, and comparable. Most importantly, I also want to underline that the Beyond GDP agenda does not want to complement only GDP, but also the existing SDG indicators framework, meaning that there is a renewed commitment toward existing SDGs. The call is for complementing with a small set of indicators the existing SDG framework. Because the policy objective is slightly changing, meaning that we're looking at prosperity, we're looking at the well-being of people and the health of the planet. So this report advances a short proposal on identifying metrics that are critical for advancing women economic empowerment to inform action toward inclusive economies as well as sustainability. The first dimension regards supervisory care and direct volunteer work. These are unpaid forms of work, are productive from an economic perspective. They're not included in GDP, they're not included in the SDG indicator framework. Supervisory care refers to the unpaid on-call time that caregivers spend by being in proximity to care dependent should the need for unpaid care services arise. Additional, it would be beneficial to incorporate metrics that assess the ethical standards within the production and consumption value chain, including the business adherence to human rights and women's empowerment principles, as well as green jobs. These metrics should encompass also the use of innovative technologies to promote a more ethically driven care economy, which holds particular relevance in contexts where informal employment is prevalent. Promoting the game.
Cecilia, I really need
Yes.
to mention that we need to wrap up the presentation, so we have some time to address some of the questions posed in the group.
Sure. So let me just please finish with a very short video that summarizes the main messages. This was actually the last slide, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you for all the content. Fantastic. Really enlightening, and congratulations for this report, which, as I said, it comes at a very timely moment to influence the construction of Beyond GDP. So we had Amber Park. We have been collecting some of the questions. My suggestion here is to turn it to her to get some of these questions loud, and then give all the panelists of the sessions the opportunity to take one, let's say, to give final comments and remarks to respond them. So go ahead, Amber.
Thank you so much, Raquel, and thank you everyone for putting your comments and questions and reflections into the Q&A box. We've had lots coming through, as I said, a mix of comments, questions, and reflections. We've done our best to answer some of them live so that we make the most out of our time. We have about 10 minutes, so I'm going to choose just a couple that I think would be useful to share in this discussion time together. So let me just read out the ones that we'll ask, and then I'll point to which panelist we would like to hear from. So for some clarifications around the use and applications of the tool, we had two questions, really thoughtful questions coming through actually around how to ensure that this policy tool doesn't result in increasing occupational segregation in regards to care jobs and women in those care jobs. I'm going to ask Ipek to answer that question for us. She has put a really great question in, answer into the chat, but Ipek, I'll ask you to speak to that when we move to you. We also have a question for our country representatives. Dr. Puyal from Nepal, what are the social protection measures that Nepal has taken towards supporting women in the care economy? And Madame Bouba from Morocco, there was a question to ask about what is the timeline needed to see some of these gains? Again, really great question, reflecting on the fact that it obviously takes time to see the gains from these policy changes. We then also had a question related to our final presentation, final segment on the Asia Pacific report on Beyond GDP. And a more practical question around the upcoming process around developing indicators that complement and go beyond GDP, asking whether UN Women and ILO and others are taking part in these consultations and high-level discussions. So Raquel, I will ask that one of you. Of course, colleagues, Christine and Cecilia, please also feel free to complement. I'm going to keep it there so we've got time to hear from our panelists. Ipek, if we can start with you, and then we'll move to Dr. Puyal, Madame Bouba, and then Raquel for you finally. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that important question on occupational segregation and whether investing in care serves in a way to increase through employment generation for women, serves to increase gender segregation of jobs. Well, the reason that we get the result from these simulations that employment creation is relatively more to women's favor than to the favor of men's employment is in fact due to the statistical fact that care sectors are more dominantly populated by women workers. At the same time, however, the more we expand care employment in a labor market, when there are increasingly more care jobs in the labor market to meet that enormous demand for care services of various population segments, what we observe is that the higher the probability that men will be selected into an expanding care services sector. At the same time, any care services expansion plan should be accompanied by specific policy and program measures to ensure that it does not increase gender occupational segregation. And I should also mention, I think Valeria added an answer also to follow from mine, where she reminds us that in making this demand side argument for placing the investments in care within a wider macroeconomic and sectoral framework as the other two policy tools do. In fact, we are working to address sectoral segregation through multiple channels. I think this is it for the time being.
Who wants to go next? Dr. Pujal, if you want to come up on the specific question on Nepal.
Okay, thank you very much for this opportunity. And the question raised here is really wonderful, and it requires a very comprehensive answer, but I'll try my best to give you some logics and some evidences based on our practice and how we linked those all issues into the integrated national social protection frameworks, which already approved from the cabinet in Nepal. First of all, that measures, you are just talking about what are the measures of social protections to link with the women care walks or care walks in Nepal. Basically, we have more than 87 schemes of social protection in Nepal, and we now redesign them, and we formulated in different groups based on the nature of social protection existing in Nepal, and also based on the budgets and resources that we allocate from the government and from other sectors. So now government's major focus is to is to make a very perfect interventions to ensure the constitutional rights of the women, children's, old age peoples, and all. That should also linked with the care work and care economy. While people work at home or at their relatives' houses or somewhere in the motive of contributions to the people or in the motive of the cultural motivations, these are to be translated into the monetary unit, and it is quite hard right now. But what we did was we just started linking the social protections schemes into the production base or productive social protection initiatives in our framework. And next one, we also developed one special, the interventions about contribution-based social protection as well. And next one, making our social protections universals and based on the philosophy of the universalism. The expansion of social protection is a basic need, but the required budget and the financial resources to make it ensure is very limited with us. So we just made some room for involving all those right-based social protection scheme into the need base. And while talking that need base, I think that care economy and care work related interventions and works, as well as the activities which have been in practice in Nepal, are to be now transferred or diverted into a kind of the self-employment related works or entrepreneurship related works, and based on the expertise, skills, and the health conditions of the people, those who are in the care works. So 16th periodic plan has envisioned, which I already also spoken about, the skilled, healthy manpower or human capital formations to make it sure for generating more jobs, more decent job and productive employment in Nepal. So for all those,
we need to close as to give floor to others to respond as well. So thank you for your.
It's finished. To do those all things, the policy is very important. So we made a kind of institutional reforms in a country. As country is now experiencing the three tiers of government, and constitutional rights of all governments are now under definitions, and they are also in the implementation. So data generation work is rapidly ongoing, and now we have a provision to make sure of all those formal works into the contribution-based social protections frameworks in a job market. So next one, in 16th plan, we also envisions about bringing all those informal sectors work into our account. And finally, we are thinking of about redefining the system of national accounts also into making the contributions of all care works into the monetary unit. That will be a kind of a practice, and I think globally also we can come up with that agenda, and from our experience and from our good learning,
Thank you,
the
Dr.
other
Hu.
peoples also
I'm
can
sorry to
replicate it. We are
have
doing
to
our
cut
best.
you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, sorry to have to cut you, but otherwise we will not have time to other speakers to comment as well. So very fast, I want to turn the word also to Ms. Buba on reactions on the questions.
Merci beaucoup. Je crois comprendre que la question qui m'a été posée, c'est par rapport au timeline. Ça veut dire combien de temps cela peut prendre pour pouvoir atteindre les cibles que nous avons évoquées en termes de création d'emplois des femmes. Je voulais juste ici rappeler par rapport à la méthodologie, comment nous l'avons appliquée pour pouvoir avoir ces résultats. C'est que nous avons pris comme année de base l'année 2019, pas l'année 2020, parce que comme vous le savez, l'année 2020, c'est une année exceptionnelle avec l'avènement du Covid. Donc, il y avait eu quelques, je dirais, des données qui ne sont pas aussi fiables, qui ne traduisent pas vraiment la réalité dans la continuité et les moyennes enregistrées. Donc, nous avons pris comme année de base l'année 2019 et pour atteindre les 100% de généralisation du préscolaire comme étant une exigence pour pouvoir avoir pour avoir, je dirais, atteindre tout les 50 000 emplois des femmes, c'est par rapport à un horizon vers 2027-2028 qui est l'horizon qui a été fixé pour atteindre les 100% de la généralisation du préscolaire. Mais cela signifie comme quoi il y a aussi la prise en compte de tout l'environnement par rapport à ce qui se fait, par rapport à l'implication de toutes les parties prenantes. Je tiens juste à vous informer qu'il y a tout un travail qui se fait actuellement pour pouvoir accélérer l'atteinte de ces objectifs avec l'implication de la société civile. Le ministère de l'Éducation nationale et de préscolaire, il travaille avec la Fondation nationale du préscolaire qui fait un travail extraordinaire par rapport à un programme de formation des éducateurs et surtout des éducatrices pour pouvoir les former afin de travailler dans le préscolaire à l'échelle nationale et aussi le milieu rural. Donc, juste pour vous dire que en termes théoriques, en exploitant, je dirais, l'outil, c'est beaucoup plus à l'horizon, en partant des données 2019, c'est à l'horizon 2027. Mais on peut atteindre ce chiffre même avant parce qu'il y a tout un travail qui se fait actuellement grâce aussi au fait que nous avons pu, c'est grâce à l'implication de toutes les parties prenantes appuyées par ONU Femmes et aussi à l'implication du ministère de l'Économie et des Finances et notre direction de pouvoir donner chiffres à l'appui, l'apport, je dirais, de généralisation du préscolaire. Donc, il y a une dynamique qui s'accélère. Il y a aussi tout un travail qui se fait actuellement au Maroc parce que tout le monde maintenant et les pouvoirs publics en premier sont conscients de cette question de la baisse de l'activité de femmes. Il y a tout un travail qui se fait pour pouvoir gérer et travailler sur le préscolaire, l'accélérer et en même temps sur la question aussi du garde d'enfants. La note d'orientation générale, je dirais, qui a accompagné du chef de gouvernement, qui a accompagné la préparation du projet de loi de finances. Il a beaucoup travaillé, il a beaucoup rappelé ces questions tout en mentionnant l'intérêt je dirais, de la question de la prise en charge des enfants et des petits-enfants pour pouvoir libérer le temps aux femmes pour pouvoir accéder, sinon être retenu dans le marché du travail. Voilà ce que je voulais vous dire. Merci.
Thank you, Ms. Buba. I don't want to take too much time because I want to go to the opening remarks, but just to provide some information on the process of Beyond GDP, as stated in the Pact to the Future. There is a high-level expert group that is going to be convened to define and to discuss on these new metrics. It's headed by the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, but it's also co-convened with other UN agencies, DESA and UNDP. And from our side, and also Valeria, you can also speak on ILO sides. We are also already in discussions with colleagues to first ensure that within this high-level expert group, we have feminist economies. Let's not forget that feminist economies had already challenged the concept of the GDP as not a good measure of what the economic contributions are. And this has been done for more than 30 years in feminist economies. So make sure experts include feminist economies, that measures bring indicators such as the one Asia compiled in such a comprehensive manner and are part of these measures. And most important, how are we going to come up with these new measures to become part of the mainstream decision-making processes where financial institutions, country institutions are also using GDP as main reference for, for many of the decision-making. So this is part of the process and how we foresee to go through that. I don't know, Valeria, you want to add anything? Okay.
Cecilia wanted.
Okay, so
yeah, just very briefly, yes. So the Beyond GDP actually calls for metrics that are already existing. So it's not about new metrics. It's about really leveraging existing gender data. So a mapping is necessarily the first step. But as you rightly said, Raquel, is indeed critical that the gender and the feminist economies perspective is included in the Beyond GDP perspective, and that's what the report advocates. But most importantly, we have been already collaborating very closely with the ILO statistics within the group of the revision on statistical guidance on time use, and there has been actually some work, a lot of work done on supervisory care has been already adopted by the United Nations. And increasingly, countries will be including and producing data and statistics on supervisory care, which is really what policies and care policies are trying to diminish the time constraint on women when they do provide unpaid care services. And this is already been included in the task force on well-being of the revision of the SNA. So to a certain extent, it's already part of the Beyond GDP and already reflect very indeed historical concerns of feminist economies. Thank you so much.
Excellent, excellent, great point, Cecilia, as well. So without ado, thanking you all panelists for such a wonderful and comprehensive journey on going from, from the framework to the tools and then the data and evidence to influence actually these global but local processes as well. I want to pass the floor to our two colleagues, Ana Moreno, who is the technical secretary of the Global Alliance of Care. This and many other of the activities we have gone through during this General Assembly period have been supported with the Global Alliance. So, and then we will also turn into Sakti Dakturpa, which is the ILO Director, Condition of Work and Equality Department. I will first start with Anna, and then Sukti, you can take the floor right after. Thank you, Anna, and welcome.
Thank you, Raquel. I hope you can hear me, all of you. And thank you first of all, to all the panelists and all the teams behind the rigorous and in-depth presentations that we have seen and all the policy unit report. I echo, in fact, all the participants' comments that they have been just praising to this inspiring and solid content and event. So thank you very much. I will try to be brief because, as you can imagine, I cannot even try to conclude with remarks after having heard such a rich presentation. So thank you to UN Women, thank you to ILO, thank you to the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation for convening the event. And I will also like to say that during these days in the General Assembly and with the Summit of the Future, as Raquel was mentioning, we have heard a lot about the need of data and evidence to keep pushing for care as an investment and not as an expense. The cost of inaction in care systems, that there have been a lot of conversations among the members of the Global Alliance for Care, but also among other actors during these events. And I think the policy unit that you just have, the policy tool that you have just presented, as well as the report, are going to give us a lot of tools and a lot of food for thought in how to present care at the center of the development agenda and to bring the care at those discussions of the development agenda, including, by the way, what they mentioned that Raquel did to the GDP, Beyond GDP comments and paragraphs in the Pact for the Future. I would like, again, also mention the efforts of the UN Women Asia Pacific Office, not only with the report, but also to bring more actors and more member states and more stakeholders to the fight to recognize care as a need and as work and as a right. So thank you so much. And I will just pass the floor to Sukti, if I may, because I think we are just 1 minute behind the original schedule supposed to close. But please just keep working together, and looking forward to the next event. And thank you again for all the efforts and for everything that you are doing. Thank you.
Okay, so let me jump in straight away because there's very little time. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. And it was a real pleasure listening to this webinar. I learned a lot. And thanks a lot to UN Women for the excellent collaboration on the joint program, and also to SDC and UNA for enabling this. Now, I also wanted to say a couple of words because the topic of this discussion today on data and investment in the care economy aligns very well with the recent resolution that was adopted at the International Labour Conference in June of this year by workers, employers, and governments, and which was really historic in many senses. And I would like to focus on a few very key issues in the resolution that has relevance for the discussion we had today. First and foremost, we are focusing on investment in the care economy, and I would like to say that the resolution asked governments, workers, and employers to start or to have urgent action to ensure jobs in the care economy and decent jobs in the care economy. And it also asserted very importantly that just as labor is not a commodity, labor in the care economy is not a commodity. And I wanted to underline this because while it is important to have jobs in the care economy, and indeed the care economy could be the center of jobs for the future. Many studies show, including studies by the ILO, UN Women, EPEC's work. But it's also important to invest in decent work. And there it is important to have fundamental principles and rights at work, freedom from discrimination, from violence and harassment, safe working conditions, etc., etc. And because it's only through that you can really empower the workers in the care economy, many of whom are women, to really have this transformative agenda for gender equality. A couple of words also on data, because even though there was a lot of discussion on data in the context of beyond GDP, I would like to say that as of now, we don't really have an internationally agreed statistical definition on the care economy. And in the last International Conference of Labor Statisticians, we were asked to prepare a new statistical standard, which will be presented to the ICLS in 2028. And it will really help in advancing the discussion on care because there'll be harmonized data. And it will also enhance the discussion in the context of beyond GDP. And finally, in terms of advancing decent work in the care economy, the resolution notes that governments have primary responsibility, but also does the private sector, the social and solidarity economy, the community, if we are to meet the care needs of all. And that care has to be mainstreamed into all public policies, macroeconomic policies, employment, skills, labor protection, social protection, environmental policies, etc. And that there has to be adequate financing for care through creating a fiscal space. But one more point I would like to highlight, and that is that in the context of workers with care responsibilities, the resolution recognizes the importance of maternity protection, of care, long-term care policies, paternity leave, parental leave, and has also asked the ILO to see if there are normative gaps in this respect, which need to be filled to actually advance the agenda of gender equality. So finally, because of the lack of time, let me try to bring all this together. The resolution gives us some path-breaking avenues to work on, which the ILO will be pursuing. But again, it has to be done in the context of South-South cooperation, which was recognized very strongly in the resolution, and with the partners in the context of the Global Accelerator, but also with UN Women and other organizations, because we have to push more to make the case for investment in the care economy and to create the fiscal space. Because also, and I would like to end with this, the conclusions, the resolution of in June 2024 highlighted that care work is essential for all other work, and that care is essential to further the agenda on social and economic development. So thank you all. Thanks for an excellent discussion. And over to you.
Thank you, Sukti, thank you, Anna, and thank you all the panelists, but also the institution that supported the technical teams, as well as all the people that join us. Being a challenging agenda within the United Nations General Assembly, we had a lot of really good discussions in the chat. So thank you all for joining us here, and we keep on moving the conversation ahead. So we'll see you in another meeting. Thank you so much.